us a very exciting occasion. And I wanted to thank the New York Community Trust for making this event possible. They also are having us do other screenings in New York, and it wouldn't be possible without their grant. This project began approximately 5 years ago when my colleague, Jeff Beaver, was exploring the idea of developing a series on Latino history and approached Latino Public Broadcasting to partner with WIDA on this project. And for us, it's a very meaning documentary to take on for Latino Public Broadcasting, because primarily we have been developing single documentaries for PBS, but we have never undertaken a series that would encompass so many years of rich history. And it is for us very relevant that this series now airs at this time when Congress and the American public are really discussing immigration reform. And we have a series that really gives a voice and a face to really strong individuals who have come to this country and have gone through complex journeys. Latinos from many, many different countries that together have helped shape the history and the culture of the U.S. Latino Americans is a series that's being pushed out across all platforms in both English and Spanish. It's going to air next week on PBS, and the Spanish version will air on VME on Friday night. Yes, we're very excited about it. This series, as well, is accompanied by a book written by Ray Suarez, senior correspondent of the PBS NewsHour, and Ray will be here after the screening, so you can, have a dialogue with him, and he will also be signing books after this event. There is also an education component into the schools that's being distributed by PBS Learning Media, and it's also in English and Spanish. And for us, it's really exciting that this history is going to be available to kids of all backgrounds, so they can learn more about the history of Latinos, and for young Latino kids as well to see positive images of their culture. We also have a user-generated website where individuals can post their own histories in both English and Spanish. And also, events like this are happening across the country in partnership with our PBS stations and Latino organizations. So as you can see, it's a big undertaking and a very exciting time for us. So before I pass this on to Jeff, I know that both of us want to thank our funders, PBS and CPB, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Summerlee Foundation, the Anna Burke Fund, and of course the New York Community Trust, who is bringing individuals such as you, New Yorkers, to come together around a series and discuss your own experiences as Latinos in the U.S. Thank you.
Two more funders, both Ford Motor Company and the Arthur Bunning Davis Foundations. I just wanted to say real briefly, this is a very special occasion for all of us, but especially I have very fond memories of going to high school up a couple blocks away on 135th Street and Convent Avenue in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was known as Spanish Harlem to people who grew up in New York City. And at the time, of course, you encountered a huge, diverse group of people from all around the city at this high school. But the kind of history we learned, really, was what we thought was American history. Was the Pilgrims, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Declaration of Independence, and we didn't know a thing about Latino history, not a thing. And really it wasn't until the early 70s that the term, whether it was Mexican American history, Chicano history, Cuban American history, started to come to light, really. And it slowly has grown to light the more that Latinos have become really the largest minority with 53 million people in the country. And it's amazing how once people become large and powerful, all of a sudden their history starts to be uncovered. Latino Americans is really not an end but a beginning. It's a beginning of uncovering a history that has long been buried, forgotten, discarded. As Sandy said, everything is in Spanish and English, and including on PBS broadcast on Tuesday nights on the SAP channel, everything will be in Spanish, the book in Spanish, online in Spanish and English. It's very, very important for us to reach a diverse group across the country, and I hope you tell your friends as well and colleagues about both the series, the book, the online. Real briefly, what you're going to see now are excerpts from the film series from each of the hours. We start from the beginning, when the Spanish come. The excerpt you'll see here is of a man named Juan Gonzalez, who, like many people, fought in the Alamo in very, very complex history. You'll see in hour 2 the story of Juan Salvador Villaseñor, told by his son Victor, who comes here during the Mexican Revolution to pursue really the American dream, and goes from being a poor kid at age 13 to being a bootlegger to being a very wealthy man. You'll see an excerpt during World War II, what happens to people and how the history of a real hero was buried. You'll see the rise of political power in New York City, especially with Herman Medeo. You'll see a really turning point in Los Angeles when students walked out demanding that Latino, Chicano history be taught, that Mexican Americans be and other Latinos be represented in the schools with teachers and administrators. And then you'll see in hour 6 the rise of second, third, and fourth generation Latinos in positions of power and influence. That will be followed by a panel discussion. I'm really honored to be here with 2, not 1, but 2 members of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists Hall of Fame, Ray Suarez and Juan Gonzalez. I have a baseball sign by Sandy Koufax, but it won't be anything compared to 2 Hall of Famers here who are in the front row. Juan Gonzalez probably needs no introduction. He's an award-winning journalist, columnist for the New York Daily News, author of many books, including the very, very first book I read about this history, Harvest of Empire. He's an investigative journalist. He's exposed corruption in politics, in the police department, healthcare around 9/11. We're thrilled that he's moderating this panel, and we're thrilled that he is featured in our series. Ray Suarez, as you heard, is the author of our companion book. He's the chief national correspondent of the PBS NewsHour. He was the host of NPR's Talk of the Nation, an NBC journalist in Chicago, and of course, a Hall of Famer. Adriana Bosch is our series producer. Adriana was born and raised in Cuba. She came here as an adolescent, and she was the series producer for Latin Music USA, documentaries on Castro, Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and she's our leader and visionary for Latino Americans. So Ray and Adriana will participate in the panel discussion led by Juan. So now we'll show you clips from the series Latino Americans.
I think we are astonished at the number of incidents chronicled in the film that even we were not aware of. Luckily, over the past 30 or 40 years, there's an entire generation of Latino scholars who have developed and who have really brought a lot of this history to the forefront. There are quite a few of them, obviously, David Montejano, Vicky Ruiz, Virginia Sanchez-Corot. But talk to us about some of the things that surprised you, even as you worked on the film and then on the companion book, about things that you had no idea about.
I had a disagreement, I think an intellectually dignified disagreement with my collaborator, Adriana, about where to begin the story.
There we go. There we
And
go.
I think the film looks great, and if you thought that was great, where do you see the other 5 hours and 5 minutes? You're gonna knock your socks off. But I felt that we had to start the story earlier in order to set the table for what came after. And I found myself reading the journals of the Catholic clerics who went with Juan de Oñate wandering around what became the American Midwest and the Southwest. And they were the first people to see, for instance, the unbroken prairie grass that stretched on for hundreds of miles in every direction. They were the first Europeans to see that, the first Europeans to see the buffalo. And they tried to describe an animal that would amaze people back in Mexico City and Madrid. And I wanted to have that first encounter with the Indians, since if you're making a point that this was a story that was already underway when some grouchy English people in buckled shoes got here in Massachusetts.
Developed and who have
Really lived to see the tremendous U.S. influence in the Spanish-speaking world of this hemisphere. But boy, he was writing about it in the 1880s and the 1890s. So that was fun. And also the case of Isabel Gonzalez, who goes all the way to the Supreme Court to fight for the right of Puerto Ricans to move to the mainland, not as immigrants, but as people moving from one part of American territory to another, as unremarkably as someone moving from Michigan to New Jersey. She arrives on the SS Philadelphia in New York Harbor in 1903 on a boat that's carrying a cargo of tropical produce to one of the great markets of the world, New York City. And of course, as with every boat that comes into the harbor, two people come on deck. A customs agent and an immigration agent. The customs agent goes to look at the cargo, the immigration agent starts to look at the people. There are Cubans, there are Venezuelans, there are other people on board, and they are taken to Ellis Island. Isabel Gonzalez says, oh, well, I'm not going to Ellis Island because I'm not an immigrant. I come from San Juan. And they said, well, you're not a citizen of the United States. You're a citizen of Puerto Rico, and you're going to Ellis Island. And she does go to Ellis Island, is there until influence